All right, we'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Adar Aleph, Mrs. Selma Woolf, with immense gratitude for the refuos from Hashem and the merit of refuah for all of those in need, and the zchus of our brave soldiers and the return of our hostages. The Schwarzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwarzbaum, Aharon Yosef, Ben Meir, zechus, the Lavine, and Behrman families, in memory of Bill Zev Shmuel, Ben Yisroel, our week of learning sponsor, Steve Galaska, in honor of the bris of his grandson, Nachum David, Ben Eliyahu Baruch Halevi, Mazel Tov, and Daf Yomi sponsor over today, Jack Gladstein, in memory of Stephen Gladstein, Yisrael Chaim Ben Menachem Mendel Halevi, Zichron Livracha. And of course, we dedicate all the Maseches Baba Kamli Ili Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michal Harush, Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, his Neshama will have an aliyah, and the family a Neshama. Well, so with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, a really packed and exciting daf. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Zayin. And we are picking up on TORAH on Kuf Tes Zayin Beis 116b. TORAH is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. 20 lines up from before the lines get wide. No, not from the bottom of the page. That would be realistically in line with the rest of the global program. This is 20 lines up from before the lines go wide, but it goes quickly. TORAH Sher Shais Malachas Bamidbar. Va'amad Gayis V'Tarpa Va'aver Echmen V'Hitziel. So it was an interesting case. You have a caravan that is traveling through the deserts, and what happens? They get robbed. They get held up, and obviously the wealth, the spoils, the money, right, the assets, the property of the caravan is taken. And one of the guys of the caravan decided to go ahead and try to rescue back the property, and he does so. So what's the halacha? Hitzila emsal. I will say whatever he rescues gets split amongst the chavra, amongst the caravan. Okay, again, we have to define the parameters. Rashi says over here, Hitzila emsal, kol echad makir shelo b'noto. So Rashi explains over here, le'emsa doesn't literally mean that we split it down the middle, but rather, again, whatever he recovers, the chavra in the caravan says, oh, you know what, that's my saddle, that's my watch, that's my computer, that's my this. So they all are able to identify their property, and everybody's able to take back what they had. Fine. Let's say we'll call him Reuven. Let's say Reuven says, I'm tracking down the thief. Well, listen, Chevra, I'm putting my life in danger. Well, I shouldn't say that. Reuven says, I'm going to rescue the property, and I'm keeping everything I rescue for myself. Then if he goes out on his own to rescue the property, then whatever he rescues is his. And Meir says, well, okay, what's the case over here? If anyone is able, in other words, I will say, if the property is savable and reclaimable, and technically speaking, anyone could have done it, then I feel safe and then I will say in all cases, when someone goes and reclaims the property should be divided up amongst the members of the caravan. I will say, if on the other hand, it's not possible, in other words, it puts yourself in mortal danger to be able to reclaim some of the property, then I feel the rationale asking. Then when Reuven decides to go out on his own to reclaim the property, he should be entitled to keep everything. Now, what's the chilik there? The logic is very simple. Rashi says over here, Ishi yicholim bailim lahatzil lo iyayish va'afilu amar liatzmo gazlanu. But here's a simple distinction. If the property is technically reclaimable, albeit with some level of difficulty, then under those circumstances, the owners are not miyayish. Because there's no yeyosh, when Reuven goes and reclaims the property on behalf of the group, everyone has the right to share in that property, in their particular property. On the other hand, if the property, is really, in other words, you have to put yourself in mortal danger, which means it's really not reclaimable, then they pretty much have yeyosh. When they have yeyosh, then the person who goes in and rescues it has every right to go ahead and keep it for himself. So that's really what this is kind of dependent on. Did the owners have yeyosh? Didn't the owners have yeyosh? So that's the Gemara is asking. If the property is reclaimable, and what does reclaimable mean? Reclaimable means it's difficult, but you can get your stuff back from the thief. The owners don't have yeyosh. If the owners don't have yeyosh, then even if Reuven acts unilaterally, or even if Reuven tells the group, Chavra, I'm going and I'm keeping everything. No, you're not. The owners weren't miyayish. If they're not miyayish, you don't have a right to keep it. On the other hand, If it's mortal danger to go ahead and get your stuff back, that means they did have Yeush. If they did have Yeush, then if Reuben goes out to reclaim the property, then what? Whatever he gets should automatically remain his. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, what's the case? What is the case? So we'll say some really interesting answers over here. So Rabbi Chama says, what are we dealing with over here? Shutfin. Partner. So we'll say, if you can imagine over here in this particular case, Reuben and Shimon are partners. Now watch this. Ukegon zeh shutav cholik shelo ledas. All right. So watch this. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Rehalcha b'shutav ubein yecholim lahatzil bein yechol lahatzil ukegon zeh b'makom ibud mamon shutav cholik va'afilu lo yirtzeh chavero." Okay. So watch this. So we'll say here's how Rabbi Behrman wants to set up the case. Let's just call it, even though we're calling it a caravan, let's just call it Reuven and Shimon, or Reuven and Shimon and Levi. It doesn't matter how many people, but they're all partners. They're all partners in the merchandise being transported by the caravan. Then I both say there is a whole discussion about, actually it's above Mitzvah discussion, about the ability of a partner to dissolve a partnership without the consent of his other partners. In other words, can you unilaterally dissolve a partnership? So let's assume for the purposes of our conversation, the answer to that is no. However, again, I will say, in a case of loss, you do have the right to effectively dissolve partnership. So Rabbi Chama is suggesting over here, and it's really very interesting, that the situation over here is by Shutfin, and in a case like this, a partner, we'll call him Reuven, has the ability to dissolve the partnership. And essentially what he says is like this: we've been robbed, I am going to reclaim stuff. So we'll say, so now, watch this. Amar palig, lo amar lo palig. So I will say, if at the end of the day he says, I'm going to reclaim the stuff, then Lamaisa, everything is divided up amongst the other partners. If he didn't say anything, then ultimately there is no need to divide it up amongst the partners. Okay, so that's how Rabbi Bar Chama. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Amar palig u'ma'akiv chelko mashehitzil lo amar lo palig. So Rashi says v'shapir avad demisar nafshei iska detarvayu hoil v'hu shutav imo orche lemitra chakula iska. So I will say, it's very interesting. So halacha l'maisa. If he went ahead and he made the claim, right? If he went ahead and he made the claim, and he said, I'm going to rescue property, so I'll say, so in that case over there, he goes ahead and has the ability to actually ma'akev chalko. Lo amar, lo public. Fine. So that's right, Bar Chama. Fine, let's go back there. Rav says, Paul and Askinon. Rav says, no, what are we dealing with over here? Workers, Paul and Askinon. So we'll say, so now what does this mean? There's the caravan, and then there are workers, people who work for the caravan. The case over here is where one of the workers of the caravan is the guy. He's the Reuven. He's the guy who decides to go out and reclaim the property. Ukirav do'amarav poel yochal lahachzir ba'afilu b'chatzi hayom. The Rabbi says actually an interesting halacha. Let's say you hire a worker. So let's say the worker decides midday, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. Right? I've decided on a career change. Right? So we'll say, do you have a right to tell the employee no? You don't have a right to. In other words, you can't decide. You can decide on a career change tomorrow, right? But for today, I hired you to work for me, and you need to finish that job. So the Gemara says, Rav says, Paul Rav says, no, a laborer has the right to renege on his employment even midday. Even midday, he can walk away from the job. I will say now, watch this. The kamadalo haderbe kibish. So say, now watch this. So the Gemara is suggesting as follows: if halach l'maisa, Reuven the worker goes and tries to retrieve the property, so now if he's operating as an employee, then whatever he brings back ultimately remains the property of the members of the caravan. If, however, again he essentially says, I quit, and now that I have all this free time, I'm going to retrieve that stolen property, he gets to keep it because it's Yeush. Okay, the kamadolo hadirbe kirushus de balabais. So as long as he has not reneged on his employment, anything that he does, he's in the rishus of his employer. Therefore, if he retrieves property, that property gets divided up amongst the members of the caravan. The chihadirbe, so the Gemara says, right? The chihadirbe taimachrinahu. Now when he reneges on his employment, so then he's his own man. What's the reason for that? The chsiv ki li bnei Yisrael avodim. He They will say this is very important, that your employee is not your servant. Your employee is not your servant. So we'll say, so that's why an employee always has the right to walk out. There's no such thing as a person not being able to quit his job. Because if you can't quit your job, we call that avdos. Avdos. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says the only people Klal Yisrael are avadim to are me and not anyone else. So we'll say, so here's this interesting distinction. So in this case, again, the caravan is robbed. Ruvain, who works for the caravan, if he goes ahead and goes to rescue the property as an employee of the caravan, then anything he brings back is split down the middle, or whatever, is split up amongst the members of the caravan. If, however, he quits his job and he goes and he rescues it, he's acting on his own volition. We're assuming in this case over here there's Yeosh, and he would get to keep the property. Incredible. Rashi says, so it's an interesting case. Rashi says, what's the case? Rashi says over here, Rav Ashi Omer, Li'olam be'inish da'alma, ukigon v'yicholin lahatzil ayedei adchak. So Rav Ashi is saying over here, in reality, the person saving the property is not a member of the caravan. It's just a guy. And the property is savable, right? It's savable. However, ayedei adchak. What does ayedei adchak mean? It's difficult. It's not pashut. Now watch this. So the Gemara says, so kishyachol hatzei ayedei adchak. Gali daite liatzmo, lo gali daite le'emsa. So we'll say, if he's megaladas means if Ruvain says, so now we'll say, Ruvain is just an independent guy. Ruvain sees what's happened. It is dangerous and difficult to retrieve the property. So if Ruvain says, Chavra, I'm going to retrieve the property, but because it's dangerous and difficult, I'm keeping it, then he has the right to keep it. Because it's dangerous and difficult, we assume the members of the caravan had what? Had Yeosh. Therefore, they relinquished ownership. So if he's Megaladas and he says, I'm going to capture it myself, for me, he can keep it. If he doesn't say anything, then the assumption is he's capturing it, or I should say he's rescuing it on behalf of the members of the caravan. He can't keep it for himself, and it gets split up amongst the members of the caravan. Incredible. What a great case. Mishnah. Really interesting case again. These are all, by the way, fantastic cases. All fantastic cases. Watch this. This is great. Reuven steals a field from Shimon. Now, the truth is, remember, you can't steal. We have a concept of karka in an exelis, right? You can't steal real property. That's going to come up in just a moment, but let's just read the Mishnah. So, all right, Reuven steals a field from Shimon. Masikin. So we'll say now what happens? What goes around comes around, right? So now masikin. I will say literal translation of masikin are people who extort things from others. So now essentially, after Reuven steals from Shimon, someone comes, right? The extortionists come and take the field from Reuven. Okay, so we'll say, so now what's the shaila? What's Reuven's liability vis-a-vis Shimon? That's the shaila. So watch this. If makos medina so we'll say, if everyone's being extorted, makos medina means this is happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. In other words, these extortionists are mamish taking property from everyone. So then what's the halacha? So watch this. Reuven could go back to Shimon and say, Shimon, listen, I'm so sorry. Go get back your fields from the extortionists. In other words, not my fault. But I was about to say, what's the logic of saying Harisha Chalafanecha? What's that logic? That logic seems to be because what essentially Reuven can say to Shimon is, even had I not stolen the property from you, what would have happened? The extortionists would have taken. So in other words, essentially, you're in no worse shape. It happens to be, I intervened, all right, I stole it from you a little bit earlier, but the truth is, I didn't materially change anything for you. Had it not been me, it would have been someone else. In Machmas HaGazlan, however, let's say the extortionists went ahead and took it from Reuven because of Reuven. In other words, let's say this is not a widespread dynamic, but instead, again, the extortionist Dafka came after Reuven for whatever the reason, then what's the halacha? In that case, Reuven would be chayiv to go ahead and furnish Shimon with another field. Okay, great case. Let's analyze. Mandatani masikin lo mishtabish, mandatani matzikin lo mishtabish. So we'll say we begin with just simply a syntax gemara. Is it masikin or is it matzikin? So beautiful news over here is Rabbi Yitzchak says they're both correct. Mandatory matzikin lo mishtavish tichsiv b'matzor or b'matzok. So we'll say the one who says matzikin because the pasuk says b'matzor means a siege and matzok means destruction. Or mandatory masikin lo mishtavish tichsiv yirash hatzaltzel u'mutargaminon yechasnina sa'aka. And we'll say the one who says masikin because the pasuk speaking about the destructive nature of locusts. And the Targum has locust as yachsinina saka. Okay, so bottom line is matzikin or masikin. Bottom line, it translates as people who take things and destroy the property of others. Incredible. Remember again, what did the Mishnah say? One more time. Ruvain steals from Shimon. Then extortionists come along, Masikin come along and take the fields from Ruvain. So the shaila is, what's Ruvain's liability vis-a-vis Shimon? So the Gemara says it depends. If it's a Makas Medina, if the extortionists are taking from everyone, then essentially Ruvain could say to Shimon, I'm so sorry, Harush, go take it up with the extortionists, because they had not taken it from me, they would have taken it from you, so you're no worse off now that I stole it, and therefore I'm not chayiv. If, however, the extortionists came and stole it from Ruvain because they had beef with Ruvain, then Einach Nami, in that case, Ruvain owes Shimon another field. Alright, so now let's go. Says the Gemara, Hechidami, what is the case? So the Gemara says, Ilema da ansua la aradide, velo ansua kule arta, hamirisha shamas mina makas medinahi. So I say, in low. So I say, so what are you talking about over here? If the extortionist, if the Masikin came along, and Dafka came after Ruvain, and didn't come after anyone else, okay, so then that's the Mishnah. So then that's a case where they stole the field Dafka because of Ruvain. If they stole it Dafka because of Ruvain and Dafka from Ruvain, then Ruvain is obligated to give Shimon a new field. Lo tzricha, watch this. Da'achve ichvuye. Oh, okay, Abosai. So now watch this. The case of the Abosai is not necessarily where, well, look at Rashi. Da'achve ichvuye, shelo gazlahu asmo ela shamavis hamelach shamavakshin ligzal sados, ve'her lahem tlu karkazu shaploni. Wow. Says the Gemara, Abosai, here's the case. Ruvain didn't steal anything from Shimon. Rather, Abosai, what happened over here? Ruvain heard that the king was looking to seize property. And what did Ruvain do? Ruvain showed the king's collectors Shimon's field. Wow. So we'll say, so watch this, right? Be careful about the friends you select, right? So we'll say, so what happened? So Ruvain showed the king's collector Shimon's field. So in this case, we'll say, what is the liability? So on one hand, did Ruvain steal from Shimon? No. But Ruvain definitely did is he pointed the king's collectors in Shimon's direction. So watch this. So lishna achrina, other or alternate version is Hamas kinan kigon dansua akum va'amri le achvi ar asa va'achvi ahu bahadayu. Or what's the alternate version of this is that someone turned the screws on Ruvain, right? Someone turned the screws on Ruvain, saying to Ruvain, we want to take property, show us property that we could seize, and Ruvain showed them Shimon's property. Bottom line over here is the Gemara is reframing the case. It's not a situation where Ruvain stole from Shimon, but rather, again, it's a situation where Ruvain disclosed information about Shimon's property to Masikin, and the Masikin subsequently stole that property. So I will say, so that's the case over here. We'll say this is going to be what's called, well, actually, I'm not going to call it anything yet. Let's go right there. I'll tell you. It's called Matzil Asmo B'Mamon Chavero. So I will say it's going to be a case, again, we're going to define the parameters a little bit, where essentially you save yourself with someone else's property. So now, the reason I'm hesitant, I shouldn't have used it so early, only because you forced me to disclose. That's what I did over here, right? But again, because in this case over here, lav dafka, that Ruvain's in mortal danger. So we'll get to Matzah Asmo B'Mamon Chavero in just a little bit. So again, but they'll say that's the case. So we've reframed it. It's now not a case of Ruvain stealing from Shimon, and then again the Masikin taking it from Ruvain, but rather again it's the Masikin coming to Ruvain, we're in the market to seize property, point us in the right direction. Ruvain points them in the direction of Shimon. So we'll say, so now plugging it back into the Mishnah, so the Mishnah seems to say, listen, if this is happening to everyone, so it's going to happen to Ruvain regardless, therefore Shimon's not chayiv to Ruvain. If, however, again, they dafka came to Ruvain because of Ruvain, there's something happening to Ruvain, and Ruvain instead disclosed Shimon's property, then Ruvain is obligated to once again make Shimon whole. That's what it sounds like it's saying, but let's analyze a bit more. Who gathered the achvi akira akario the Hy'd Be'erish Kalusa. So we'll say there was a guy who pointed out to the group of Gentiles, to the group of Akums, right, the pile of wheat, the silos of wheat of the house of the Reish Kalusa. And essentially, again, they went and they seized the wheat from the Reish Kalusa. So we'll say, same case, right? We've got a Ruvain pointing out the wheat of the Reish Galusa to Masikin. So what? And they took it. So I was looking at Rav Nachman. So they brought the case before Rav Nachman. Chayve Rav Nachman l'shalume. Rav Nachman said to the guy, to Reuven, you have to pay. You pointed out the wheat, right? You disclosed the whereabouts or the existence of the wheat of the Reish Galusa to the Masikin. They seized it. You have to pay. Yasser Yosef Achari Drafuna Barchia. So Rav Yosef was sitting behind Rav Huna Bar Chiya. If Rav Huna Bar Chiya kamed Rav Nachman. Rav Huna Bar Chiya was sitting in front of Rav Nachman. Amarle Rav Huna Bar Chiya Rav Nachman. Dina o knasa. Oh, we'll say this is great. So we'll say, so now watch this. So now Rav Huna says to Rav Nachman, Rabbi, I understand you're passing that Reuven in this case, right? Reuven who disclosed the information about the wheat of the Reish Galusa to the Masikin. The Masikin took it. Rav Huna, you're now saying, Reuven, you're trying to pay back the Reish Galusa, the value of the wheat. Rabbi, is that a din? Or is that a knas? Are you saying that Reuven is chayiv because he mamish caused damage, he caused loss, or you're penalizing him? Okay. So the Gemara says, Amalei Masnisini, it's a Mishnah. Disnana machmas agazlan chayiv lahamid lo sadeh ve'ukimna da'achli achvuye. So Rav Nachman says it's a Mishnah. We'll say, how do we just interpret the Mishnah? The case of the Mishnah ultimately is where Reuven is actively disclosing the information about the whereabouts of the asset that the Masikin subsequently take. And when he does that, he incurs liability. That's this case. So the Gemara says, Basra denafik amali Rav Yosef Rav Huna Bar Chiya my nafka lachamina. So we'll say after Rav Nachman left. So Rav Nachman didn't answer. Essentially Rav Nachman said, well, he did answer. Rav Nachman said, it's a din. It's a din in the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? If Reuven goes ahead and discloses the whereabouts of an asset, of Shimon's asset, and the Masikin come along and they take that asset, Reuven is chayiv, because Reuven is the one who divulged the information about the asset. That's this case. That's this case. So after Rav Nachman left, Amalei Rav Yosef Rav Huna Bar Chiya, my nafka lachamine. So interestingly enough, so Rav Yosef asked Rav Huna, what does it matter if it's a din or a knas? Just out of curiosity, like what does it matter? But it's like top of Kof Yud Zayin 117a. So might have to be a dina knas. So Amalei, watch this. I dina gamrinan mine, I knasa lo gamrinan mine. So let's say, so Rav Huna responded, I'll tell you why it makes a difference. Now let's say, you could extrapolate one halacha from another halacha. You cannot extrapolate anything from a knas. As Rabbi said, remember, knas in general is a chiddush, right? Knas is something novel. So you can't take a case of knas and learn out from knas to something else. But if it's mammon, right? In other words, if it's a monetary compensation case, then in Achinam you absolutely can learn out from one case of mammon to another case of mammon. So watch this. So how do you know that you can't learn out from knas to another case? Here we go. The Sanya. This is great. So also listen to this. Remember we had this situation before. This is called hezek she'eino nikar, right? Unrecognizable damage. So for example, I will say, you go over to someone's produce and you make it tameh. Right? You go over to a coin's truma and you make it tameh. Or we'll say, your friend's gloating to you about his beautiful bottle of wine that he got. You say, I'll show you, and you make it have all the zara. Now we'll say, now these are cases of hezek she'eino nikar. This is unrecognizable damage, right? Because remember again, the item itself looks no different. So what's the halacha? The halacha is yuchayiv. Chazru lomar af hamedame. So Rabbi said they went ahead and they came back and they included in this list ultimately medame. Rabbi said medame is the case where you mix in chulin with truma. Or truma with chulin. Chulin with truma. Right? So the Gemara says, now here's what's interesting. Chazru in lo, chazru lo. Rabbi said they had to come back and include medame in this case. Rabbi said, here's what's interesting. Intuitively, you should include medam in this case because it's also hezek she'eino nikar. My time, Rabbi said, now why do they have to go back and include it? Why couldn't it just intuitively be included? Very simply, mishum knasahu uknasa lo gamrinan minei. Because this is a knas. Because we'll say, technically speaking, you should not be chayiv for hezek she'eino nikar. Right? Why? You should only be chayiv for damage that is recognizable. If it's unrecognizable from a halachic perspective, it shouldn't be, in other words, it's a status change, but it's not really hezek. So what do you see from here? So hezek she'eino nikar, unrecognizable damage, is going to be chayiv al knas. It's a penalty. And what you see from here is you can't learn out one penalty from another. So they had to go back and include the case of medama afterwards on its own. Incredible. So the Gemara said, no, not necessarily. Maybe not. We'll say maybe just in the beginning they only approved the penalty, or they only instituted the penalty for large losses, right? Like metame and menasech. But for smaller losses, like medama, Rabbi say, because medama can still be consumed by a kohen, right? So lemaisa, but by medama, maybe a lower loss, they didn't penalize. Lubasov savri lahavsim muat nami chashashu. So we'll say then they added in even a case of a small loss, like medama as well. To which is that so? Vahatani avud. We'll say but yet vahatani avud Rabbi Avin. Yet Rabbi said Father Rabbi Avin had a different girsa. His girsa was parishona hayu omrim hametami v'hamedama. So we'll say in this version, interestingly enough, you have metame, which is big loss, medame, which is small loss, and then it says they also came along later on and included menaseh, great loss. So the Gemara says chazru in, lo chazru lo. My time, what's the reason? Lav mishum delo garmina miknasa. So we'll say, is it not? Is it not because you see from here that you can't learn out one knas from another? Lo, we'll say first wide line, lo meikara savrik Rabbi Avin. All right, well, see, here we go. So the Gemara for a different reason. In the beginning, they held like Rabbi Avin, and in the end, they paskined like Rabbi Yirmiyah. Okay, what are we talking about? Here we go. Meikar Savrik Rabbi Avin. In the beginning, they held like Rabbi Avin. I was saying, what does Rabbi Avin hold? This is fasting, second wide line. Don Rabbi Avin, Zarak Chetz Mitchilas Arba Ulubasof. Arba, the Karish Shiurim Bahali Chaso. We'll say, watch this case. It's Shabbos. Reuven shoots an arrow, right? And we'll say the arrow goes Dalar Ames in Rosh Hashanah. What's the halacha? Chayim Nisa, right? Hotzah. Let's say in the course of the arrow, right? In the course of the arrow traveling, it tears Shimon's silk garment. So we'll say, now what do you have over here? You have capital liability and you have monetary liability. Sounds like a case of Kimne B'Dravimine. The shaila is there simultaneous? Rabbi Avin holds, ultimately again, pater, you are pater on the silk. Why? Shari akira tzarech hanachi u'mischai ben afsho. So we'll say, Rabbi Avin essentially holds that halacha l'maisa, the moment you pick up the arrow and you begin to shoot it, there is a simultaneity over there. Everything is kind of occurring at the same moment, because the same act ultimately triggers the hotzah as well as the damage to property. Therefore, there's a simultaneity, and therefore, Allah Chalamayis, you're chayiv for the capital crime of Chilul Shabbos, but going to be pater for the monetary obligation. I want to take a look at Rashi in just a moment. Akira tzarech hanacha, lifting it up literally is part and parcel of the placement down. Rashi says, Dechivan de ben akira lahanacha kara, nimsa ma'isa Shabbos u'ma'isa akira ba'in ke'achad. So essentially, what Rabbi Avin says like this. We'll say, since the malacha of Shabbos requires a lifting up of the object, a dislodging, which is the shooting of the arrow, and the arrow coming to rest. Those are the two bookends of the malacha. In the middle of those bookends, the damage to the property occurred. So because ultimately, again, the damage to the property is embedded in the malacha of Shabbos, there is considered to be a simultaneity, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, you are chayiv for Shabbos, but going to be pater, ultimately, again, for the monetary damage for the silks. Rashi says over here, Nimsa Shabbos u'maisa akira ba'in ke'achad. So we'll say, so therefore again, there's simultaneity. But we'll say, but the logical simultaneity is that the Chilul Shabbos is the bookends of shooting of the arrow coming to rest. In the middle of that malacha is the tearing of the silk. Everything is occurring simultaneously. Beautiful. The Gemara says as follows, Ulubasov Savik Rabbi Yirmiyah, in the end they held like Rabbi Yirmiyah. What did Rabbi Yirmiyah say? Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishas Hagba Kanye, Ichayiv Limamon, Mischai Benafsha Lohavi Ad Shas Nisoch. So I will say this is interesting. So ultimately, Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that there's not simultaneity. In other words, we'll say the ripping of the silk occurs first, but the Chil Shabbos doesn't apply until when? Until the arrow comes to rest. Right? So Lamaisa, there's no simultaneity, and therefore halacha Lamaisa, you are going to go ahead and be chayiv for both. Now I will say, so the Gemara is suggesting that in these particular cases, the same halacha apply, or this same machlokes applies to these aforementioned cases as well. Okay, go back to Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here Hachanami, in that same Rashi, Akira Tzorach Hanacha, Hachanami, Hagbas Yayin Tzorach Nisuchu, V'tashlumin, V'chiyuv Misa, Davodazara, Bayin Ke'echad. So I will say, so they want to just apply it back to the case of Hezek Sheno Nikar. So I will say, so it's the same Shaila. Let's just take the case of Yayin Esach. When I go over to Ruvain's wine, I pick up Ruvain's wine and I make a Yayin Esach. So I will say, remember again, making something Yayin Esach has a Chiyuv Misa. It's Avodah Zarah. So the Shaila is there simultaneity or not? According to the first opinion, there's simultaneity, right? The opinion of Rabbi Avin, there'll be simultaneity. Everything is occurring at once. According to Behrman, there's not simultaneity. Why not? Because when you pick up the wine, that's the gezel, that's the theft. Making an avodah zarah only comes about a little. It could be even a moment later on, but there's not simultaneity. Okay. Rafuna bar Yehuda. So therefore, I just want to point out the question was still left unresolved. In other words, we'll say, so halacha l'maisa. Remember, what was the question? The question was, when Reuben goes ahead and shows the masikin the property of, well, remember, this was the case of the guy who showed the Reish Kalusa's wheat, but it's the same case of the Mishnah. Right? So someone comes over to Reuben, says, Reuben, we want to steal stuff. What can we steal? And Reuben shows them Shimon's wheat. And now we know the Mishnah tells us that Reuben is going to be chayiv for showing them Shimon's wheat. The shaila that was posed to Rav Nachman is this a din or is this a knas? So what I just want to point out, that was not answered. Rav Nachman seems to answer. Rav Nachman points to the Mishnah. It sounds like when he points to the Mishnah, what is he saying? That it's a din. But it's not abundantly clear. Is it a din or is it a knas? So just keep that in mind. That's still kind of hovering over us. What's the nafkamina if it's a din or if it's a knas? So what the Gemara says is, din, mammon, you can learn out one case of mammon from another case of mammon. You can't learn out one case of knas from another case of knas. Okay, just keep that in your back pocket. Let's go. Rav Huna bar Yehuda, Ikla Be Evyone. Rav Huna bar Yehuda went to Be Evyone. I will say Be Evyone is a shem makam, it's a place. He came before Rabbi. Listen to this. So he asks Rabbi, tell me, did you have any interesting shilas? Okay, Amarlei. Yisol Shansu of the Kochavim, the Hera Mamun Chavero, Bali Yadi. So Rabbi says, yes, funny you should ask. I had this very interesting case of what happened. Of the Kochavim made a Yisrael show them Jewish property that they could seize. And what happens? They made Reuven show property, and Reuven disclosed information about Shimon's property. They seized Shimon's property. V'chayavtiv, and I ruled that Reuven is chayiv. That Reuven is chayiv. Both say, sounds like just the case of our Mishnah. I said that Reuven is chayiv. Amarle, ahadra of delemara. So Rav Huna said to Rava, you better return the money to Reuven. You paskined erroneously. You paskin wrongfully, right? You need to go ahead and return the money to Rava. Disanya, why? Disanya. Yisrael shansu of the gocham behera mamun chavera pater. We'll say that if a Jew there was an ones, a Jew was coerced by non-Jews to go ahead and show them Jewish property, and Reuven showed them Shimon's property. Reuven is pater. However, v'im natal v'nasan biyad chayiv. I will say now, if Reuven goes and takes Shimon's property and gives it to the Akum, then Reuven is going to be chayiv. So I will say, interestingly enough, the Bryce over here makes a fascinating distinction between showing property versus handing over property. So if Reuven simply shows the Akum Shimon's property, Reuven's not chayiv. If Reuven actively hands over Shimon's property, Reuven is chayiv. Amar Rabba, imhera me'atzmo kinos kinosa v'nosan biyadami. Furthermore, Rabba says, if Reuven, of his own volition, shows the Akum Shimon's property, in other words, he's not coerced. Whatever the reason, he doesn't like Shimon. So he shows the Akum Shimon's property, that's the equivalent to actively handing it over. So we'll say, essentially three cases. Case number one, Reuven is coerced by an Akum to divulge property, and Reuven shows them property, they take Shimon's property, Reuven's not chayiv. Case two, Reuven actively hands over, still coerced, but Reuven actively hands over Shimon's property. Reuven is chayiv. Case number three, Reuven of his own volition hands over Shimon's property to Akum, or for that matter, again, shows them, doesn't have to hands over. Reuven of his own volition shows Shimon's property. Reuven's going to be chayiv. Okay, so therefore I will say, watch this. So therefore I will say, dansu of the kochavim, va'ach v'achamra, the Rav Mari Breidra Pinchas Breidra Chista. So we'll say there was a guy, Ruvain, who again was coerced by an akum, and he ended up showing them the wine of Rav Mari. Okay, what happened? Amrlei, Dari va'amti bahadan, Dari va'amti bahadayu. So Rashi says, Dari va'amti, Si'i v'holich imar lebeis hamelech. So let's say, so now what happened? This is interesting. So we'll call him Ruvain, right? So Ruvain goes and shows the akum, the winer of Rav Mari. The akum then turns to Ruvain and says, Ruvain, you need to carry this wine for us to the palace. In other words, carry it for us. Asla coming to Ravashi. So we'll say, came before Ravashi. So we'll say, so now the Shaila was, so we'll say, so now again, based on what we just learned before, in the first part of the case, where we'll call him Ruvain, just simply divulged information about the wine, what's going to be the halacha? What's going to be the halacha? Pater. Right? Pater, why? Because he was coerced, and he just showed it to them. Okay, that's according to the Bryce we just saw, that's going to be Pater. The problem is, after he divulges the information and then say, carry it for us, and he carried it to the palace. So Shaila now is, what's the liability? So Ravashi, Patrine, Ravashi said he's Pater. How can you say he's Pater? We just learned in the Brisa that if you actively hand over the property, you actively carry it and give it over to the akum, you're going to be chayiv. So also listen to this. This is actually fascinating. So what happened? So Ravashi says like this: We'll say, when do we say that a Jew is liable for actively handing over it? That's essentially when the Gentile wasn't literally standing over it. We'll say, once the akum was already standing over the property, it's as if the property has already been repossessed by the akum. In other words, we'll say, when do we say that there's Jewish liability for handing over the property to an akum? When the akum had no knowledge of it, right, and no connection to it. In this case over here, the akum already forced the Jew, Ruvain, to divulge the Jewish property. The Jew already divulged about the wine of Rav Mari. At that point, it's already effectively in the possession of the akum. Carrying it to the palace afterwards doesn't make any difference. And therefore Rav Ashi patered the guy. Very interesting. Ace Rabbi Yavo Ravashi. So Rabbi Yavo raised the kasha to Ravashi. So Amr lo anas hoshit la bikia amir zeh o eshkal anavim zeh v'hoshit lo. So we'll say if the anas, right, if the anas sibling is masikin, right, if he went ahead and said, go ahead and hand me this package or this bundle of straw, or hand me this cluster of grapes. So we'll say, so again, remember, what's happening over here is the akum is telling the Jew, give me that straw, give me those grapes, hand it to me. They're selling it to Ruvain. It's Shimon's straw, it's Shimon's grapes. V'hoshitlo, and Ruvain does so, chayiv. Ruvain's chayiv. So we'll say, so now B'Pashas, we're assuming over here, this is also a case where the akum is already standing there. So the akum is standing over the property of Shimon. All he's asking for Ruvain is just hand it to me. Yet we see that Ruvain's still chayiv for that. What's the case? I will say the case over here is where the akum is on the other side of the river. So the akum is asking the Jew for help because the akum himself can't reach it. So I will say that. So in that case over here, the Jew is enabling the akum to do something that he could not otherwise do. They can hoshit v'lo tani tran. They could infer this because it says hoshit, extend it to me. It doesn't say give it to me. So I will say, so just to point out where we're up to over here. So it sounds like based on what we've learned right now is that halacha l'maisa, we seem to have machlokes in the Mishnah and the Brisa, right? What happens if the masikin come over to a Jew? They say, give us property. And now the Jew, Ruvain shows them Shimon's property, and they take Shimon's property. Is there Jewish liability or not? The Mishnah seems to indicate yes. The Brisa seems to indicate no. In the Brisa's case, when would there be liability? There'd be liability if the Jew Ruvain actively picked up Shimon's property and gave it to the Masikin, or Ruvain of his own volition pointed out the property to the Masikin. It could be also there's not a machlokes in the Brisa and the Mishnah that the Mishnah is referring to case number 3, right, where the Jew of his own volition, Ruvain of his own volition, points out Shimon's property to the Masikin. That's where the Mishnah says that ultimately there's liability. Okay, so let's go back. So we'll say, so we still have to tie this all together. A lot going on. Hushusa dava menaseh alei beit trade. What's the interesting case over here? There was a trap. Shusa is literally a trap. Let's just call it a net filled with fish, right? The fishing net filled with fish. And Reuben and Shimon were arguing about it. about who owned it. So that's how they betray. Hayamar didihu, v'hamar didihu. So we'll say this is so right. Reuven says the net is mine, and Shimon says the net is mine. All right. So what happens? Leparhagna demalka. So Reuven decided, you know what? I'm going to give it as the taxes to the king. Okay. Amr Abaye Yachal Lomar Anna Ki Masri Didi Masri. There's no liability. Reuven doesn't have any liability. Why? Because when Reuven gave the net to the king, he could claim that's what? I was giving my own property. I don't understand. Just because Reuven claims this is property doesn't make it his property. Does he have that level of credibility that he could just give over the net to the king without any ramifications? We excommunicate him. So we'll say it's actually very interesting. So Rabbi says that's not how you resolve legal disputes. In other words, if there's a legal dispute about ownership, you come to Beis Din. That's how it works. You can't just decide to take the unilateral act that you decided to give it to the king. That is asur. So what's another case? So Gavra tavaboy achvi astivna dechavre. There was a guy, so call him Reuven, and Reuven went ahead and showed Shimon's straw to the masikin. Also the kamei derav amrlei lo techvi v'lo techvi. So we'll say. So I should take it back. What was going to happen over here is there was a case where Reuven was going to show the straw of Shimon to the masikin. So this case came before Rav. Rav said, "Do not do it. Lo techvi. Do not show the property of Shimon to the masikin." So watch this. We'll say, "Amrlei." This guy Reuven, real chutzpahdik. Amrlei machvina umachvina. I'm going to show and I'm going to show. Don't tell me what to do. Right? I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna do what I want to do. So Yasir Rav Kahana Kamei Rav. So Rav Kahana was there in front of Rav. Shamte. So the Gemara says Shamte lakoi minei. So I will say. So now watch this. So Rav Kahana was sitting there before in front of Rav, and I will say Rav Kahana broke the guy's neck. Right? He broke the guy's neck. He killed him. I say. That's a Rav, right? He broke the guy's neck. Okay, so we'll say so. Okay, obviously a lot to unpack in this story over here, right? So he broke the guy's neck. So what's going on over here? Sakari Rav Eluye banecha olfu shachlu berosh kol chutzos kiso michmar. So I will say literally the pasuk is quoting over here is from Yeshaya. Literally, again, your sons are downtrodden. Shach b'rosh kol chutzos kitso michmar. They're like a shar. Kitso is a shar, like an ox in a trap. Maso zeh kevan shenafal b'michmar imerach min alav. Just like once the ox falls into a trap, you have no rachmanas on it. Af mamon shayisrael kevan shenafal biat ovdei kochavim imerach min alav. So to Rabbi say, when Jewish money falls into Gentile hands, they have no rachmanas. Rabbi says, what's happening over here? Rav Kahana killed this guy because he said he has the din of a moser. I will say, so a moser is a Jew who gives over other Jews to a despotic government. I will say, I just want to be clear. I will say, this is not a topic for today, but the word moser is often misused in many contexts, right? If someone, I will say, is doing something that is illegal and that is harmful and hurtful and puts others to danger, involving law enforcement is not mesira. That's not, again, obviously, every case is different. We're talking about the concept of mesira. The concept of mesira is handing over a Jew to ultimately a despotic government. That's what it is, to a tyrannical government. That's the concept ultimately, again, of mesira. But halacha, so therefore, again, Rav Kahana felt that this guy, so again, remember, understand what's happening over here. Rav says to him, do not give over Jewish property to masikin. And the guy says, I'm going to do whatever I want. A person like that is a danger to the community because it starts with money. But I will say, but again, monetary matters very easily escalate into sakanas nefashos. Terrifying. Rav Kahana thought the guy was a moser. The halacha will say is you are permitted to execute a moser. That's halacha. That's why Rav Kahana went ahead. So Amalei Rav Kahana. So Amalei Rav Kahana ata idna havu parsai lo kapti. So we'll say actually changes this to Amalei li Rav Kahana. So he said to Rav Kahana, ata idna hava parsai lo kapti ashvichus dami. Up until now we were ruled by the Persians. Persians don't really care about bloodshed. In other words, they don't really care if Jews kill each other. However, again, Hashta Ika Yavani, the Kaptua Shvichos Damim. Now we're ruled by the Yavanim, the Greeks, and the Greeks do have laws. So Va'amri, Mardin. And they're going to take, the problem is now, they're going to say, Rav Kahana, you took the law into your own hands. That's a sign of rebellion. So therefore, Klum Sak La'aradi Yisrael. So Rabbi will say, now Rav Kahana is getting advice, run away. Right? Rab's telling him you got to run to Eretz Yisrael. You got to escape. You have to leave Bavel. The Kabbalah Alacha, but Rav Kahana, when you get to Eretz Yisrael, accept upon yourself to lo tikshi Rabbi Yochanan Shevshin. Go to learn about Rabbi Yochanan, but you cannot ask any questions in Shir for 7 years. For 7 years. We're going to institute this for certain people as well, right? Right? You cannot ask any questions for 7 years. For 7 years, and I will say, now, why he was being told to do that is a whole different discussion, which not for now. So we'll say fine. So now Rav Kahana goes to Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Kahana escapes from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. He finds Reish Lakish, right? The Yosef becomes a Sayim is Sifta the Yoma l'Rabbanan. So we'll say Reish Lakish is chazering the shir from Rabbi Yochanan. He's chazering. He's giving over. Reish Lakish gave the chazar shir. He gave the review shir. So he's sitting down with all the Rabbanim, chazering the shir Rabbi Yochanan from that day. So he says, so Rav Kahana hears, he says, where could I find this Reish Lakish? Amrulei Amai. So they said, why are you looking for Reish Lakish? Amrulu, Hai Kusha, Hai Kusha, Hai Peruka, Hai Peruka. So again, because Rav Kahana said, I heard the shir, and I heard Reish Lakish ask this question, that question, I have this question, I have this question, I have this answer, this answer. So Rav Kahana said, I heard the shir, and I have questions, and I have answers. Okay. Amrulei Reish Lakish, so they said to Reish Lakish about what happened. Az Reish Lakish on Rabbi Yochanan, Ari Allah mi Bavel. So this is incredible. Reish Lakish hears about this. He hears about this great Talmud Chacham Rav Kahana, and he says, Rabbi Yochanan, a lion has come from Bavel. In other words, someone who is great in his learning. That was a compliment. A lion has come from Bavel. This is incredible. Li'ayin marbi mesiftal machar. This is great. Reish Lakish said, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi, you need to really prepare shir for tomorrow. In other words, you need to write this. You can't dial this one in, right? You need to prepare shir for tomorrow because Rav Kahana will say. Now, of course, remember Rav Kahana was under strict instructions to what? To not ask any questions. That's what Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so what happens? So the machar osvei b'darakama. So Rabbi say. So now next day, Rav Kahana shows up in the Beis Medrash. Out of a sign of deference and respect to Rav Kahana, they seated Rav Kahana in the first row of the Beis Medrash. Okay, so us osva bidara kama so kama Rabbi Yochanan. Amr Shmaisisa, Rabbi Yochanan gave shir. V'lo akshi, Shmaisisa v'lo akshi. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying shir, and not one question. So I'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Yochanan was profoundly disappointed of Kahana, and he felt obviously this guy's no lion. Anchase achorei shevadari ad osve bidara basra. So I'll say, interestingly enough, so they went ahead and they pushed him back. First they pushed him back a couple of rows, then another couple of rows until he sat in the back row. So I will say, so first of all, interestingly enough, what do you see from here? Number one, sitting in the back is not good, right? Number two, I will say, what else do you see? That in the Beis Medrash, they would seat people according to their status in shir. Right? The more chashav you were, ultimately again, the more towards the front, the less chashav you were sat towards the back. And I will say, see, this would never work in 2024, right? Why? Because I will say it would be deemed highly offensive. See, I will say, what's important to know in Yiddishkeit is to know where you are holding. It's offensive that you're sitting in the back of the Beis Medrash. Work on yourself and get yourself to the front. See, I will say, it's not the responsibility of the community to make you feel good. It's your responsibility to work on yourself enough that you feel good about where you're holding. I will say, feeling good about oneself can never come from external sources. Feeling good about oneself comes from knowing that I am putting in maximum effort, that I'm working hard, that I'm improving myself. And if you don't feel good about yourself, I will say, no one else has the obligation to lift you up. I mean, I don't mean, of course, on a chesed level you do. I will say, but on a real level, on a real personal level. So I will say, yeah, so the guy who was sitting in the Beis Medrash, guess what? I will say, he knew where he stood in shir. He knew. You're a backbench guy. That means you are not as good in learning or not as astute, or not as sharp as a front bench guy. But guess what? Work hard. And you could get yourself from the back bench to the front bench. What an incredible yisod. It is not the job of other people to make you feel good about yourself. It is your job to push yourself. It is your job to work hard. It is your job to climb the ladder of success and get yourself where you need to be. Incredible. So Rav Kahana starts the day in the front row and ultimately ends up in the back row. So Rabbi Yochanan sees Rish Lakish afterwards. He says, Ari she'amarta na'asa shual. By the way, that guy you told me who was a lion, he's no lion, he's a fox. And I was going to say, he's a shy and mika guy. Amr yehe rava dahani sheva dari. So Amar yehi rava dahani sheva dari lehavu chiluch sheva shnin da Amar li Rav. So I watched this Rav Kahana and said, okay, Rav said I had to be quiet for 7 years. Now I was switched back 7 rows. The 7 rows should be in lieu of 7 years. And I was both saying, it seems to be, 7, oh good. So a lot more to say about it, but not even a second. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows. So what happens? Kama kare. So we'll say, so Rav Kahana goes back over to Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Amrle, nehadar beresha. Rabbi, would you mind repeating shir all over again? Amr shmaisesava akshi. So every single thing that Rabbi Yochanan said, Rav Kahana raised the kasha, right? So he moved him up a row. Amr shmaisesava akshi. He said, another part of shir, right? Ultimately, again, Rav Kahana asked another kasha, right? V'akshi. So Rabbi Yochanan havi yaseva sheva bistarki. Shalfi lechad bistarki mituse. Amr shmaisesava akshi. Adu shalfi lekulu bistarki mituse. Adi yosef al ara. I will say furthermore, Rabbi Yochanan himself was sitting on 7 rugs. That was like his chair. Every time Rav Kahana asked him a good kasha, he would take out one of the rugs. Until at the end of the day, he was sitting on the floor. Rabbi Yochanan, so we'll say, now what happened? Rabbi Yochanan gavra sabahava umasrecha gevine. So Rabbi Yochanan was very old, and apparently he had very, very long eyelashes. And his eyelashes literally like hung over his eyes. Amar lahu daluli einai va'achsie. So Rabbi Yochanan said, he said to his attendant, move my eyelashes. He was very old, because I want to see this lion, right? I want to see this lion from Bava. So who's asking all these great questions. So we'll say what happened. Dalulei b'mechalta dikaspa. So literally they had like a silver zach to lift up the eyelashes. Okay. I'm sure you could purchase it, right? The silver, right? To lift up the eyelashes. So lift up his eyelashes. So chaza de parti svase. So we'll say, listen, this is an incredible story. Rav Kahana had a split lip. Now Rashi points out over here, it's last Rashi, Nikra svasa aidi make. He had been beaten up. When he was beaten up, who knows when he was beaten up? As a result, he had almost like a permanently split lip. So what happened? Savar achuch kamechayich bei. Rabbi Yochanan thought that Rav Kahana was mocking him because the split lip looked like a smile, like a smirk. He thought that Rav Kahana was smirking at him. He was very distressed. He felt like he was being made fun of. He felt sad. V'nach nafshe. Rav Kahana died. Now we'll say, rough story, right? So we'll say, Rav Kahana died because he caused distress inadvertently caused distress, ultimately to Rabbi Yochanan. So the next day Rabbi Yochanan was like a little bit surprised. He said, did you see how that Babylonian, referring to Rav Kahana, conducted himself with me, that he just smirked, like all smug? So he said, Rabbi, no, he wasn't smirking. That wasn't it. He has a split lip. He has a permanently split lip. All the Gabei Ma'arta, so we'll say at this point in time, so we're going to see that Rabbi Yochanan goes to the grave of Rav Kahana. We'll say we're going to stop over here for today. I could retire with that. Right? I could retire with that. That groan of wanting more. I will say, spent my whole life wanting to hear that was the most beautiful sound I ever heard in my life. And I will say, we'll pick up over here. We are nowhere near on schedule, right? It could be, maybe we'll do the last limit at the seal. All right, we'll figure that out. We'll say, we'll stop over here today. We'll pick up tomorrow at 3:30 in the morning. Emir Hashem. Shkayach.